Hello, comics people! Ako si Mel Kasipit and welcome to Indie Comics Podcast Live. Very special episode kasi meron akong kasamang dalawang bigatin sa comics scene. So matagal na silang nagko-collaborate sa paggawa ng comics. Si Paolo Chikiamco and Borg Sinaban. Welcome to the show.
Yay!
Yan.
Thank
Oo.
you.
Thank you for having us.
Si Borg, na-interview ko na siya ng dalawang beses sa Indie Comics Podcast. So, si Sir Paolo Chikiamco ay first time dito sa IKP. Ayan. So, Paolo
Yes.
Chikiamco is a lawyer, an enthusiast of both mythology and professional wrestling, and a Filipino writer of prose, comics, and interactive fiction. He is the co-creator of the graphic novel A Sparrow's Roar with Christina Rose Chua, which was published in 2019 by Boom Studios. His prose has been published in anthologies such as The Sea is Ours, The Best of the Philippines, and his interactive wrestling novel Slammed were was released by Choice of Games. Nag-feedback words, wait lang. I-ano mo. Ayan, okay. Naririnig ko yung feedback eh. Ayan. Ito naman, introduction for Borg Sinaban. Borg Sinaban is a Filipino freelance illustrator residing in Manila. He specializes in illustration for sci-fi, fantasy comics, and book covers for young adult novels. He has worked with local and international publishers including Adarna House Publishing, Boom Studios, and Scholastica Asia. Borg has been an active member of Ang Ilustrador ng Kabataan since 2013. His notable book projects include Studio Salimbal's Meet Space and Muros, and he has also contributed to the crowd-funded anthology The Sea is Ours, Tales of Steampunk Southeast Asia. The second issue of his children's comic book series, Pilandok Comics, published by Adarna House, won Best Book of Graphic Literature in Filipino at the National Book Awards 2014. Follow his work on Twitter and Instagram, yan, Borg Draws, or get in touch with him at borgdraws@gmail.com. Yan. Napakabigati naman nung guest ko, parang nahiya na ako bigla. Wait lang, nakamute ka, Paolo.
Sorry. Medyo kulang pa yung ni Borg kasi this is from the Sound Anthology, so that was a few years ago.
Oo, may bago na
Si
siyang
Borg,
libro
busy
ngayon.
yan.
Oo. Meron na siyang bago, yung Endangered, yung selection ng Pico.
See?
Oo, nakakaya naman. Okay, so welcome to the show. Kung may mga nanonood dito na gustong sumali at mag-submit, magtanong dito sa dalawang guest natin, go lang. Ayan. So, going back, pwede nyo ba kaming kasi Sound Anthology, nag-update na, meron ng Delay Anthology yung bagong libro ng Difference Engine. Pwede nyo ba kaming i-introduce kung ano yung bago sa inyo, Borg and Paolo?
Naka na, Borg. Nabanggit na yung endangered.
Yun. Yung dun sa bago nilang Comics Anthology na delay, nakita ko nga yun, tapos buti nagulat ako kasi buti na lang tinuloy nila. May kasunod, so very exciting yung delay na published book. Tapos ang daming artist na magagaling. Tapos syempre si Paolo yung nag-head ng editorial stories and stuff. So,
Co-editor lang. Co-editor. Si Caris nandun pa rin. Si
okay.
Budget yung sinipa ako.
Oo nga. Okay.
Oo nga, grabe na.
Tapos, yun, ngayon, ginagawa ko yung Endangered. So, hopefully by next year, tapos na siya. Tapos, yun.
Yan, ikaw naman, Paolo.
Para gawing animation.
Oo. Bagay na bagay sa animation yan, yung ka-endangered.
Lahat naman binibigay kay Mervin. Ayan, Mervin.
Oo.
Sana nga.
Yung mga cartoon, Mervin.
O kaya kay Arnold Are, nag-animation din yun.
Tinuloy ba ni yung pag-animation?
Nag-animate siya pero baka comics pa yung ginagawa niya ngayon, yung Children of Bathala. Ayun.
Oo. Yung alam kong recent.
Yung mga total body natin yan, boy.
Oo.
Cool.
Kaya nga eh. More
Para kunwari may link tayo sa kanya.
Mm. Ikaw naman, Paolo, can you introduce us sa mga bago mong gawa na hindi ko nabanggit kanina?
No, well, that's the thing eh. Kasi, basically, most of the stuff, except for Delayed, most of the stuff that has come out, medyo yung mga reissue, like when Mythspace. Well, Mythspace kasi, yung Ignition was not out yet when Sound came. That was the big one. And but that one, kahit pa paano, sina Borg lang yun ang trabaho kasi that was the colored edition, but they didn't change anything for the story. So as far as I'm concerned, that's old work, really. Just a new, much better package. Then, Muros has come out since Muros came out after Sound.
Yes.
Yes. So, yun. But aside from that, it's just Delayed is the first new comics related thing I've done. I've been mostly working on my own things recently. May mga collaborations kami that are still sort of cooking. But that's the thing kasi with when Borg and I nagsimula tayo nung batang-bata pa tayo. Iba kasi yung pace nun. Now everybody's so in demand. It's like it's hard to find time to actually finish anything. So that's why anthology is like, that's why I was happy when Borg and I got to do Folk for Sound kasi it's short enough that we knew we could finish it. And it would we could have an idea and see it through to the end. Not have to worry about it anymore. But so even with Delayed, it's still more the co-editing rather than actually making. Although that's hard work, it's a different kind of creative work. So that's, we can talk about that more later. But that's, as far as comics is concerned, that's my newest thing. And I'm proud of the work we've all done for them.
Oo. So yung Delay yung Delay pinublish ng Difference Engine. Thank you for inviting us, Miss Olivia, kasi connect sa mga creators ng sound at sa Delay. Mga Filipino creators, kasi parang gusto niyang ipa-feature para mas ma-promote yung mga creators at yung book na rin. So how did you both first meet and start working together? Kasi alam ko marami na kayong ginawa before.
You want to tell the story or will I tell the story?
Baka iba yung version mo, ikaw muna.
I know, but everything kasi the common thing kasi is always Koy Carrion, who was our main Mythspace artist, and at the time, may studio ba kayo nun? Or iba yung sa'yo, di ba? George? Parang iba yung comics na ginagawa mo at the time.
Oo.
May nagawa ka na di ba?
Nag-comic con ako nung time na yun. On a different group.
So yun, may comic long time ago when I was still running the Rocket Capre website. Koy had released, I was doing comics reviews. So Koy had come up with, I can't remember the name, yung something about racing. Kasi si Koy mahilig sa racing sa kotse. So he made one, I reviewed it, and Koy was one of the few people Koy has always been one of the few people who can take criticism. Nice. So I said what I like, I said what I didn't like. Koi reached out to me and he said that, oh, and that's the beauty of independent run. He's like, okay, I read your review. Um, let's fix it. So I worked with him. We did a different script for that particular comic. And afterward, he said he had a group of friends who wanted to do a science fiction comic. So that was in Borg. So I said, okay, game. And then we met up. Initially, they wanted me to set them up with different spec fic writers. But I am a greedy kind of guy. So I was like, why? Ako na lang. Ako na lang gagawa nila. And because it's it's always been a problem with anthologies. It's why they're a harder sell. Is that you have to find some way to unite what's there. With different engine, yung anthologies nila have all been themed. So, sound isa, so there's a unifying force. And that's important for people who most people want to sort of lose themselves in something. So, for the science fiction anthology, I said, let's just set all the stories in the same world. I can't even remember kung may MCU na nun or something. But, we grew up with shared universe comics even before this cinematic universe stuff. So we know that there's a value in being able to have a single world for multiple stories. So that's what we did for Mythspace. So I worked with everyone. I lucked out being grouped with some of the best artists we had at the time and even until now. You can still see those of them who are still doing active comics like Borg, Koi, Tina. They're still very, very, very much at the top of the game. So, so we made our ambitious plan, and because we were young enough and had enough time and had enough energy, we saw it through. And eventually, we published everything. We gave it to Visprint, with dear departed Visprint. Well, it's still Avenida anyway. But yeah, and then after that, when we made Sarimbal, we just said basically, after we finished Midspace, yung deal was, I said, let's see what kind of works you guys want to do. We can collaborate a one-on-one. It's really different things. So that's why with Christina, she wanted to do Sparrow's Roar. With Borg, we went back and forth with a couple of ideas, and eventually, Muras was the one that came out of it. So yeah, Borg has always been a joy to work with kasi. So I never we he's very easy to deal with. Most of all of I've been lucky with all of everyone in Mythspace was wonderful to collaborate with. I mean, there's no issues with ego, there's no issues with timeline or anything like that. Um, so when after I don't know how many years later that was um, when the call for sound came. I'm friends because with a few of the people who run different engines, like si Felicia. So they invited me to submit something, and when I came up with like a kernel of an idea for it, I knew that Borge would be the best artist to bring it to life. And then buti na lang Borge liked naman the story. And then we were able to come up with it. But that's basically it. We met precisely to make comics, and every time we meet now it's probably to do comics or comics something comics related.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So yung relationship yung dalawa ay revolves around comics creation.
Yeah. Well, most of my relationships are like I don't usually go out. I mean, we just talked about it before we went on here. I mean, after COVID, I don't really go to the conventions as much. But even then, I'm not. The family takes most of my time, but I consider my collaborators like boys. I consider them friends. It's just that we don't really. It's not like we go out and share drinks or whatever. It's more that the bond is through the creation.
Ayun, iba ba yung version mo, Borge, sa version ni Paolo?
Parati.
Parehas naman.
Parehas lang. Pero
Okay.
Okay.
Huwag
naalala
mo
ko,
gawin yung dati na ako lang nagsasalita, tapos oo ka lang, oh, that's right.
parang pandemic yata nung in-invite ako ni Paolo for doing sound nun eh. Tapos parang, yun nga, parang medyo, syempre nung time na yun, um, maraming unknowables or maraming uncertainty. So parang yun nung nabasa ko yung sound, parang nabigyan ako ng hope. Yun sa storya ni Paolo. So yun, na-boost ako, na-motivate ako to draw it. Tapos yun na. Buti na lang nagustuhan niya yung drawing.
Oo. Ganda nga nung drawing mo dito eh. Napansin ko, Borch, iba yung style mo dito dun sa ginamit mo sa Endangered. Iba rin yung style mo dito sa ginamit mong style sa sa Muros.
Usually nag-jump. Parang gusto kong i-tell storya. Parang more so na parang tingin ko mas effective yung ganitong style sa ganitong type of story. Ganun. Pero hopefully may isang parang isang consistent thread across all. Hindi naman yung sobrang out of field lahat. Pero yun, tinatry ko rin ibahin kahit konti. Itinitweak ko based dun sa type of genre or sa story.
Ayun. Actually, alam ko naman na drawing mo yun. So, may common denominator naman kung paano ka mag-drawing ng mga figures at yung mga characters.
Buti na lang.
Ayan. So, next question. So, paano kayo na-inspire sa paggawa ng comics? What inspired your interest sa paggawa ng comics? General. So, nakalista talaga. Kasi nakakaya naman walang Ayun. So, ano yung mga inspiration nyo? Paano nyo, alam ko natanong na sa inyo to ng ilang beses eh. Pero bigyan nyo kami ng konting background sa comics.
Sige, ako muna. For me, wala. Parang since bata kasi ako, parang talagang nagdo-draw in na ako ng stories, ng books, ng picture books, ng comics, ng animation, ganyan, ng movies. So parang talagang na-ingrained na sa akin yung storytelling. Tapos, yun, parang mula nung bata ko talagang parang gusto kong i-drawing yung mga characters. More so yung characters kaysa dun sa backgrounds. Tapos, yun, na parang ginagaya ko yung mga nakikita ko sa animated movies or sa mga shows, ganyan. So, parang talagang na-compel ako na gawin yung parang storytelling na nakikita ko nung bata ako. Tapos, yun yung nakapagbasa ako ng libro, ng mga picture books. So parang mas lalong nakikita ko na, lalo na nung na-discover ko na parang tao pala yung gumawa nito nung libro. I mean, parang ginuguhit pala to specifically na parang with intention, ganun. So parang lalo akong na-motivate, lalo akong na-push papunta dun sa ganung profession or sa ganung calling. Tapos yun lang, parang siyempre, marirealize mo across your journey. Parang na-discover ko na mahirap pala ako mag-drawing ng paulit-ulit. So, hindi ko kaya mag-animation basta-basta. So, parang mas nag-lean in ako sa comics na parang mas may variety yung shots in a way na parang compared sa animation na parang kailangan mo i-drawing per cell or
Frame. Per frame.
page. Yan. Na parang paulit-ulit. Parang mas nag-lean on ako dun sa parang variety ng shots ng isang comic panel. Yan. So, yun. Tapos, yun, pwede rin sanang gumawa ng movie kaso walang pera for movies. So, yung comics yung parang pinaka-economical at parang pinaka-personal yung may personal touch ka pang magagawa all across dun sa gawa mo.
Yan, ikaw naman, Paolo. Kahit brief lang.
Yeah, no, I mean, comics specifically, it was the usual Marvel stuff when I was growing up. For some reason, di talaga sikat yung DC dito sa atin. But comics with a K specifically was when I discovered yung initial OG floppies edition yung mythology class ni Arlar. That was the first time I saw. That was my introduction to a lot of things, to Philippine comics, to Philippine mythology stories. So from then on, I guess it was more that I felt that was the kind of stories. Those were the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. Kasi, I mean, hilig ko talaga yung mga genre stuff. From when I was a kid, I didn't really read. I mean, yung mga una kong binasa, tumalo na ako sa nobela from the start. Pero, yung gusto ko lang basahin, yung mga fantasy or science fiction, hindi ako na-interest sa mga realistic novels. So, that carries over into comics as well, na yun yung tipo ng story na gusto kong gawin. And yung nakita ko na kaya naman siyang gawin using inspirations, mythologies that are closer to home. And yun yung gusto kong, kung gagawa ko ng story, kung kaya kong gawin in a way that takes inspiration from things that are closer to home. Kasi hindi ko rin pwedeng sabihin akin kasi hindi naman ako lumaki sa mga story ang gano'n. Even if you say it's Philippine mythology, it's still not something I claim to be my mythology. Kasi hindi naman my grandparents did not tell me these stories when I was a kid. But still, it's still something that resonates more with someone who lives here, someone who grew up here, someone who's a Filipino, and that's good enough for me. I don't think you can run out of stories told in a genre. I don't get sick of superhero stories or fantasy stories or science fiction stories, but there's no point in doing it the way other people are already doing for me. So that's why with Mythspace, our elevator pitch for that was just it was like to tell a Star Wars type space opera, pero yung inspiration ng mga aliens sa civilizations manggagaling sa Philippine mythology. So parang ganun lang. It's not simple, but it still does something in a genre that I love, but in a way that is more true to where I come from and in a way that represents something that is underrepresented that I find that is close to my heart, which is Philippine mythology. So, yeah.
Ayun. So pag-usapan natin sandali yung comics, yung short comics nyo na Flow. Paano mo naisip yung story, yung concept ng story sa Flow para sa Sound Comics Anthology?
Yung folk? I mean, the hook for sound was specifically you want to show the stories had to all be about related to some sort of take on sound, which is not a phenomenon that is closely associated with comics, which is primarily visual. So unlike yung mga movie, wala namang soundtrack yan, the sound effects are printed, but they're not heard. So it was important when I was considering submitting to see what other people had done with it. And then I can't remember what it was, what the comic was. I was looking at different comics that were about sound, and there were a lot that were about music, and the really um, and it was always a novel. It was always innovative how they could show you could make a comic about something like music, when comic is a silent medium, right? So I wanted to. There was this one. There's this autobiography. I thought I showed it to Borg when we were making this. I think yung autobiographical comic ni Monk. Um, I forget. It was a first second book na it was about yung musician si Thessalonians Monk. So yun. So it I enjoyed the way they portrayed music. So I wanted to do something music related. And when you think about the Philippines and music, for me, one of the first things I think about is karaoke. Something within reach of people who don't really, wala namang talagang musical talent, pero at least nakaka-participate sa karaoke, di ba? So, from there, it's a very short jump to Capreoke. Capreoke was the actual project name for that when I shared it with Borg. I just didn't think it would it would be a good actual title. But that's basically what the hook of the story is. It's let's do a story let's find a way to make a story work that's about folk monsters singing karaoke. So that's where it came from. But this is also during the time of this was probably a little before COVID. When it was being, I mean, at least in the formulation stage and when the call went out. So, but this was during a time of, you know, political unrest here. Well, when is there not a time of political unrest here? But it's always that's the other sound that I wanted to focus on. You say Philippines. If I say sound, on one hand I can think of karaoke. On the other hand, you think of the sounds of protests, the sounds of people trying to hold the government accountable. The only way they know how, which is through our history of protest. So when we put the two together, that's sort of the story that kind of grew organically out of it was what became folk.
Yeah. Ang ganda nga nung comics nyo kasi Pinoy na Pinoy talaga. Kapag binasa siya ng Filipino, makikita niya na okay, this story, kahit na hindi niya siguro basahin yung kung sino mga gumawa, alam niya na Filipino ito. Kasi yung Pinoy mythology, tapos yung karaoke nga, and then yung mga sinabi mo yung tungkol sa mga rally na very common na nakikita dito sa Philippines. Para sa'yo, Borge, ano yung mga paborito mong i-drawing dito sa Flow na comics? May mga favorite pages ka ba dito ng dinowing mo? Ako, mag-enjoy ako dito sa page na to.
Thank you, Will. Gusto ko yung siguro parang reinterpretation ng lower mythology creatures na parang sila, harmless sila in a way na parang usually kasi 'di ba pag sinabing aswang or manananggal, talagang medyo nakakatakot or very violent yung portrayal nung ganung type of creature. Pero dito yun yung tinry kong i-interpret sila as normal persons. Yan, katulad yan, parang naka-jacket, yung tikbalang. So, parang may hint of real people sila na namumuhay kasama nung ng mga tao. So parang gusto ko yung ganung type of uh, interpretation dito sa folk. So nag-enjoy ako dun gawin yan. Mga nakachinelas sila, ganyan. Tapos very parang, yung mukhang kapitbahay mo lang na parang makakasama mo, makikita mo sila. Parang ganun. Parang ganun yung type of design na gusto kong i-portray. Tapos yun, na-enjoy ko siya gawin dyan sa folk.
Yeah. Nakita naman namin na maganda yung pagkakadrawing sa kanila. Tapos napansin ko nga rin na hindi sila yung usual na depiction ng mga yung mga Philippine mythology na yung nakakatakot. Kasi hindi naman yun yung hinahanap nung story na portrayal nung nung mga characters. May question ako for Paolo. As one of the editors for Delay, how was the process of curating yung mga works ng ibang mga creators from Southeast Asia?
Well, editing is always difficult. Kasi, syempre, you're not the creator of the story. But you're the creator of the anthology. So you have to make sure everything fits. That there are certain parameters and boundaries that everything has to sort of squeeze into, even if it's not your story, because your responsibility is to the book as a whole. So, mahirap siya, but it's enjoyable because especially with Delay, I was working with Karis Lope, who's my co-editor, and she is a genius when it comes to to comics in general. But it also fit that we both had our own specialties. Like my focus was always on the narrative aspect. Is this cohesive? Does this character develop correctly? Does the plot flow? Si Karis, sobra niyang yung mata niya for visual details, for the way a page is laid out and flows into the next one. Sobrang galing. So I learned a lot from her. And I learned a lot from the contributors because these are Southeast Asian. So it's not my exposure to Southeast Asian comics. It's basically mostly the Philippines. But going through everybody else's submissions from, I think we got submissions from, I think every Southeast Asian country. I'm not sure about Brunei actually, but it was great to see that variety of comics coming in. But also that adds a bit more. Again, that ups the difficulty kasi usually pag kaya Philippine comics yung ini-edit mo, you know the Philippine context. You know pag the in jokes, you know the memes, you know the implications if you use this as opposed to use that. For example, if a Filipino, there's the experience of a Filipino reading Patay Kung Patay is different from someone who has no Philippine context. A Filipino will know who these people are supposed to be. Like, who are they based on? What does this parallel? Just by looking, without any other context. There's no editor's note. There's no nothing like that. You don't have that when you're dealing with another culture that you're not as familiar with. So it's more careful because sometimes you see something you don't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to me because I'm not from Malaysia, I'm not from Indonesia. So sometimes you'll have to you have to be humble enough to ask, okay, I don't get this. Does this mean something in your context, in your country? That is unstated. Kasi you can't, and then if it does, then you sort of have to mamasage mo na you don't want to lay everything out. You don't want to tell everything out. No, this image is based on ganyan and implies ganyan. You can't do that. It will ruin the flow. But you also can't leave it too subtle for the general reader. So it's a balancing act. So that's also very difficult. But again, it's also you also end up learning a lot in the process. So it was a very fulfilling experience.
Mhm. Meron ka bang ano, na country na nagulat ka na, may mga magagaling parang comics creator sa country na ito?
No, kasi this is their second. Um, we yung sa sound pa lang, the people we were with, they were amazing.
Mm.
From all from so many different countries, and even before when we were, um, I don't know if you remember Quintillion.
Mm.
Um,
Quintillion.
when Budget and I were doing that, we did a lot of research into what was the comic scene in like around us at the time. And even then, which was how many years ago now, even then you could see there were so many good creators. Now, with online stuff, it's easier to find. Just, I mean, if you look, it's easier to see that there are marvelous artists, marvelous writers from all across um, the world. It's more
Mm.
that um, I'm always uh, I always don't. I mean, I'm always gratified when I see people using um, comics in to address or at least to showcase political issues or political thought that because I don't I that's something that even here for all that we have a lot of history of protest that's not a lot it's not really utilized in that way very much, at least from what I know.
Mm.
um, but I mean I haven't been in the conventions for a long time, so I don't know if that has changed. But that one, I guess, when I would see people submitting that kind of thing to us, I'm happily surprised because usually I assume that when you submit something to a to to a foreign publisher, you play it safe. So you don't know. I don't know. Um, Even if I've been to Singapore a few times, I wouldn't be confident that I would know what is taboo here, what is publishable here. Can I have um, like what how far we can show, let's say, a homosexual relationship or um, something that's anti-establishment. You know those things. You're if you're submitting to a publisher that you're not in a country that you're not really sure of what the ins and outs are, what's allowed, what's not. You expect things to be a little more safe, but there were a lot of submissions that weren't. And I mean, that's for me, that's good because that's the story you wanted to write. And if you have the courage to to put it out there, then more power to you. So that was it. The quality was not a surprise,
Mm.
but the ability to really stick to your guns and um, take risks, that was a happy surprise.
Yun. Ano yung sorry, follow-up question lang about that. Gaano karami yung nag-submit at gaano karami yung nasama sa sound at saka sa delay anthology?
I don't know about sound delay. I can't. I know it's been so long since the first round. There are a lot because what happens with different engine submissions is they go through several rounds
Mhm.
of so there's a first round which is just the pitch and some of the sketches you see from Borges slideshow were what we submitted for the first round. It's just basically just the pitch, not a script, nothing like that, and then some character art. That's it. So there were a lot for that because the requirements are much less. It's easy to throw that out in a day or two. So there were a lot of those. Um, but so it got that got cut to, I would say, like a third. In the second round, that's when you have to start showing um, the whole script. in a few sample pages already that show the sequential, that you can do sequential art, and how you do it basically. Because there's a lot of good artists who can make a good picture, but it's not a comic.
Mhm.
So you buy the next one, you have to show that you can make a comic. So then it gets narrowed down further and further, and then there were a couple of works which we wanted to put in that, for one reason or the other, timing wasn't right anymore, that sort of thing. Um, Personal circumstances come up. So and then what that's what we were left with today. I think we have like 12, something around a dozen stories, from I don't know how many submissions, but a lot more than that. So yeah, um, because of how they do things in different engine, you have several stages of cutting. So and you also get a lot more submissions than a Philippine anthology I think would get. I think most of the local anthologies I've seen, when you submit, more or less tapos na eh. So it makes things easier for the editors, but it makes them harder to have any sort of impact on the work. Kasi yeah, tapos na eh. With different engine, after the first stage ng pitch, may feedback naman dyan. After the full script and sequential pages, may feedback naman dyan. While they're making the final draft, those who were submitting, who were letting us see the pages, may feedback naman dyan the whole time. So it's much different than what you see in Philippine comics editing, because it's basically talagang our presence was there, at least for those who chose to show things in progress, because not everybody did, and that's fine, because some of them you said, okay, this is what we want, and then okay, and then they'll give you what they said they were going to give you. But for others, they wanted more of a feedback, because that's the best thing about these kinds of anthologies. You get creators at all sorts of levels. You have the ones that were professional this is old hat na for them, and then you get those who are almost for whom this is they're going to be almost their first published work. So there's different levels of engagement we've had, but um, yeah, so that's why like it goes from so many to so few, and I think that's already more or less a number that I'm happy with. If it were any more, sobrang hirap na yung editing na, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us insights kung paano binubuo yung isang anthology. So, mahirap nga talaga, no? Okay. So, kayong dalawa ni Borg, marami na kayong nagawang collaboration na comics. So, Borg, paano yung creative process nyo? Na siguro by now, meron na kayong process step by step. So, mas madali na yung sequence ng workflow ninyo. Pwede mo ba kaming bigyan ng insights on how you do your collaboration work with Paolo?
So, sige, for example, yung Muros na lang. Yung Muros, parang tinanong kami ni Paolo, ano yung mga gusto niyong gawing i-drawing na types of genre na comics or stories you'd like to tell. So ako, sinabi ko kay Paolo, pwede tayong gumawa ng detective na sci-fi na local na yun, na parang may magic, ingrained yung magic dun sa world. So parang ganun yung naalala ko, yun yung parang sinabi ko kay Paolo. Tapos after that, after some time, nag-send si Paolo ng parang gist of story na ito yung idea na binlend niya doon sa previous storyline niya na dinevelop niya into a detective noir na full of magic. Tapos, yun, parang after nun, sinend niya sa akin, tapos pinasa ko. Then, meron ulit akong feedback na parang baka pwedeng may ganito or parang baka pwedeng merong what do you call this, mas heavy yung reliance ng parang not necessarily yung parang noir aspect pero yung parang crime aspect na parang mas heavy ganyan. Tapos yun, parang may back and forth feedback. Pero specifically yung parang main story is si Paolo yung may parang pinaka germ nun, tapos nag-input na lang ako kung ano yung mga gusto kong idagdag. Then pag meron na kaming compromise, yun, mag-start na akong mag-design ng characters, mag-start na ako magbigay sa kanya ng actual design. Tapos naalala ko parang tinapos na nga rin ni Paolo yung buong script during that time. So parang meron na siyang full-on script for Muros. And parang sumunod lang yung character design ko, I think, sa pagkakaalala ko. Tapos, yun, then yung usual na thumbnails, then pagpapanel, then parang yung story flow, pinacheck ko na kay Paolo. Tapos, yun, parang very, naman si Paolo, parang very lenient doon sa paneling, doon sa shots. Wala naman ganong parang changes in a way na parang may specific shot si Paolo na gusto. Parang as long as parang effective yung pagpapakita nung story at nung scene, parang okay naman kay Pao. So once okay na, then I proceed with the line art. Tapos yun, na parang pinapacheck ko pa rin kay Paolo pag may natatapos na pages. Tas yun, parang ang pinaka time yung nag-take up ng time to collaborate is yung parang paghanap ng compromise sa story at dun sa characters. Yun yung parang naalala kong nag-take up ng time. Bukod dun sa matagal akong mag-drawing at mag-actual line art ng pages.
Ayun. Thank you for giving us yung insight mo ng kung paano kayo mag-work ni Paolo. So, Paolo, paano ka magsulat ng story? Detailed ba? So, panel 1, ganito, ganyan. Yung very descriptive o parang Marvel style na summary lang?
The dialogue, I'll write out the dialogue. But in terms of layouting, I guess is what I'd say. I just basically, I've been lucky with the artists that I've worked with, and I've always believed naman that comics is a lion's share. It's the artist who makes it work. So even if I'm in charge of the story in terms of the actual script, I try to make it as easy for the artist as possible to interpret it, a scene in the way that they like. I don't want to put in because I come from a prose background. So one of the habits that I had to break was the desire to have too much exposition. Because the old comics would have that, right? You'd have basically a description of a scene in the caption and then the drawing of the scene, which doesn't really work for me for modern comics, and which for me just doesn't maximize the strengths of the medium. So what I'll probably do is I'll say, okay, Borg, gusto ko ito parang itong scene that start off slow and then give me a big impactful page towards the end. This is the dialogue. Um, this is where I suggest you put the breaks. This is what I suggest you go with a double spread if you want. But for the actual layouts, I just tell him what happens, and then um, he will be the one who sort of decides how best to portray it. If he needs me to be more specific, like he's stumped on something, I'm more than happy to give suggestions. Pero if not, I just let the artist work. Kasi yung visual imagination, that's why sila yung artist, yung visual imagination nila must develop it. If I like, let's say, yung sa flash na scene from folk there, I had the picture of that initial scene of entering the abandoned like karaoke parlor very clearly. So that's why I said, boy, this is what I think it should look like. So, but the other scenes and like this part with how she when she was playing the drums and making the music, that one I think there was a page from some other comic. I was like that portrayed music. I was like, this is what I think we should do. But again, it's all collaboration. So Borg is always free to say yes or no to these things. Uh, Sometimes it's something I have to draw out of him if parang Borg is like, so ano, ayaw mo, no, ayaw mo. Parang, sabihin mo na lang no. Sige, sige, wag na lang. Something else. Kasi, ang babait kasi nila. Masyado silang, or na, well, they've grown out of it, thankfully. I don't think Borg is intimidated by me anymore. But syempre when we're starting out, madaldal ako eh. If I'm trying to get a point across, because everybody nakatingin lang sa akin. So like when you're doing with space, yung mga unang meetings, it's like, okay, this is what I want to do, blam 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 blam, super ambitious plan, whatever, and then so ano, kaya ba natin? Okay, no, yeah, I have to draw them out of their shells to say what they could or could not do, what they were comfortable doing and not comfortable doing. But with people who I've collaborated with a lot, like with Borg, eh, he's much more. It's much more easy for him to tell me no to my face now, or to tell me he doesn't like something. Um, and that's great. I think that's the best part of collaborating is when you can freely express what you do and don't like, because every comic has to be a compromise. And for me, if when in doubt, I will go with his version of it. Usually, when it comes to the comic, because again, I even if I'm a writer, I'm not one of those who believes that there's a writer primacy in comics. For me, it's always artist primacy. I'm there to make the story hit its beats, to give realistic dialogue, to make those things. But like the heart, at the end of the day, the heart of it is the sequential art, and that is always going to be with the artist, not the writer.
Okay. Thank you, Paolo, for that answer. So, maganda nga talaga yung collaboration yung dalawa ni Borg. Hinahayaan mo siyang maging free sa pag-come up ng mga scenes. Pero kung meron kang specific na gusto mong makita, saka mo lang siya gina-guide. Yan, so ganun, yun yung dream ng mga comics artists, lalo na kapag collaboration, kasi may mga ibang writer na they tend to be more parang sobrang specific sa every page and panels na minsan
Yeah.
nahihirapan yung artist at napipressure, lalo na kung hindi pa ganun kasanay sa pagdodrawing. Ayan. So with that, ano yung ma-advise nyo sa mga aspiring comics creators? So, final question. Borg sa mga artists at Paolo sa mga writer.
Sa mga artist, parang siguro parang be true to what you feel and what you want to do. Parang kasi lalabas siya doon sa artwork kung totoo or genuine yung pagka gusto mo dun sa story, dun sa bagay na yun, dun sa pinaglalaban ng storya mo or dun sa message. Um, Yun, stick with that, yung kung ano yung nafe-feel mo. And tingin ko yun yung parang mag-lead to to success, to some kind of parang goal mo in doing comics. Yun. Tsaka yun, magpahinga kayo yung mga artist.
Ayun. Ikaw naman, Paolo, sa mga comics writers.
I mean, I guess all I can really say is that you have to trust your artist. You have to be a decent human being. I think that's something that gets lost sometimes. Like you're, this is something that like some people put too much emphasis on being great creators that they just end up being, they forget they're also shit people. So I think I think you have, like when you're in a collaboration, you're in a relationship. Right? It's not like, I mean, I'm not saying, you know, magkataan kami ni Borg or something like that. But you have to treat relationships with care. You have to communicate in relationships. All these, all that stuff that you see in mga in more romantic plot lines. That's just how you are with relationships. You take care of the other person. You listen to the other person. You play to your strengths. You cover each other's weaknesses. That's how a collaboration should be. And I think that should be the case with creative teams. We've seen so many professional teams that they just treat each other poorly, and no matter how great the comic is, it's always like, I don't think it was worth it if that's what's going to happen. So I think you got to find people you get along with. Um, you have to treat each other fairly and humanely, and also you have to put things in writing. One of the things I did with everyone when we put up Salimbal, I don't know if your board remembers this, was everybody sat down and we put it down in writing. We put it in the contract. I mean, that's my legal background um, rearing its head. But it's also important that if you want to be friends with people, you can't leave money stuff or write stuff unsaid. You have to put it in writing. You have to make sure that this isn't dependent on, oh, sabi mo, di ba, ganon, ganon, nung nag-meeting tayo the other day. Hindi, yung sinabi ko, ganon. And you can't leave, if you want to stay friends, putting aside, you know, profit or whatever, if you want to stay friends, you don't leave these things um, to the vagaries of memory. You put it down in writing. So, that's the other piece of advice there for me. If you're in a collaboration with anyone, treat them well, put everything in writing. So that would be my advice.
Okay. Very solid advice, Paolo. Applicable siya sa kahit sa mga artist kapag meron kayong clients. Mas maganda na may contract para to protect your clients and to protect yourself na rin sa mga kung ano yung napag-usapan at mga dapat gawin, yung scope ng work, mga ganyan. Alright. Ayan, so ang bilis ng oras, dami nating pag-usapan. Mostly si Paolo yung nagsalita. Kasi si Paolo talaga yung siguro
Sorry.
siguro advice ko kay sa mga artists or writers, si Paolo Chikiamco magandang magkaroon ng podcast kasi marami siyang mai-share sa mga comics people. Ayun. Where can we follow your work? Bago tayo mag-end. And yung Sound Anthology at yung Delay Anthology is published by Difference Engine, SG, sa Singapore. So, yan, get the book. Would you know, Paolo, kung saan siya pwedeng mabili? Meron ba sa Secret HQ?
I think Secret HQ should have sound. I don't know if they have delay yet, since medyo kakalabas lang noon, like October. So,
Ayun. Borge, saan ka pwedeng i-follow ng mga comics people natin?
Dito sa, pwede niyo akong follow sa Facebook or sa Instagram. And yun.
Okay, Borge Dross. Ayan. Yun yung handle ni Borge. And ikaw, Paolo, may mga active ka ba sa social media o
yeah, no,
hindi
I'm
masyado?
mostly off social media now. After Twitter died. Well, it's dead to me. There's no real place. Oh, I'm on Reddit a lot, but I lurk. So, if you want to attract my attention, I guess you can make a Reddit post about me or something. I'm sure I will find it. But aside from that, yeah, you can send me an email. Just try to make it not look like a spam email, so it doesn't get filtered. Chikiamco.business@gmail. You can use that one if you need to get in touch.
Ayun. Okay. Thank you very much, Paolo and Borge. Thank you sa mga nanood, sa mga comics people natin. Please like and subscribe yung Indie Comics Podcast YouTube channel. Nandun lahat yung mga previous episodes. Pero ina-upload din namin siya sa Spotify, sa iTunes, Google Podcast at iba pa. Pero may konting delay lang. Alright. Thank you very much, comics people. See you again next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks,
Thank you.
George.
Sige.